Our goals today is to hear from our wonderful panelists who are part of the graduate admissions process for various programs across UCSD and get some insight from them on kind of what goes on behind closed doors, what the admissions committee is really looking for in applicants, and what you can do to make yourself a better applicant. I'll be moderating today. I'm a pre-graduate advisor at the Career Center. I'm also a PhD student myself in the neuroscience program. So with that, I will go on to introducing our wonderful speakers today. So if our speakers could introduce themselves briefly and then tell us just a little bit about what is your role in the graduate admissions process for your program or programs. Dr. Gorin, maybe if you want to start.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Alon, and my lab is interested in basic molecular biology. I've been engaged in two programs in terms of admissions committee, both the BISB and the BMS. I've also been playing a role for the BMS focused on applicants from underrepresented minorities. Other questions that you had?
We'll get to other questions. That was great. Thank you so much, Dr. Engler.
Sure. My name is Adam Engler. I'm the department chair and a professor in bioengineering. I also am an associate director for admissions for our MD PhD program, of which you will also see Dakshin here, who is a member of that advisory board as well, and a member of or a graduate of the program. You heard from Dr. Gorin that there are a lot of acronyms that we'll use, and I apologize for those. You heard him say BMS, that's Biomedical Sciences. That's the Omnibus Graduate Program for the School of Medicine. You also heard BISB, that's our Bioinformatics and Systems Biology Training Program. That is run through my department in bioengineering. So again, we'll tend to use a lot of acronyms today, but just trying to get you used to those during our introductions. So again, thank you so much for coming, and I hope to be helpful in answering questions.
Thank you so much. Dr. Romero?
Yeah, hi, I'm Eric Romero in the biochemistry department. My role in admissions primarily is just screening applications, reading through, getting a feel for the students, and recommending to the bigger department which students we think would make a great fit for our program.
Awesome, thank you so much. And then Dr. Ramnathan, I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Feel free to correct me.
No problem. It's Ramanathan.
Ramanathan,
kind of
perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I'm part of the graduate program of neurosciences. And actually, this is my first year being part of the interviewing for that. I also interview for medical students, residencies, and I haven't actually been, I'm trying to think, I don't think I've been part of the MSTP interview process yet. So that's the only program that I haven't, even though I'm part of the, like Adam said, I'm on the committee which oversees students and things like that. I'm not actually part of the interviewing for that program, but I'm happy to answer questions around any of those things as well.
Great, well, thank you so much. We're really excited to have each of you. I think you all come from STEM programs from various departments, and so our hope is that you'll each bring in, your own set of insights into the admissions process. So I want to jump right into questions because we have a set of our own plan that I'll go ahead and ask the panelists, and then as time goes on, participants feel free to either post your question in the chat, or towards the end, I'll give an opportunity for you guys to unmute yourselves and ask the panelists yourselves. So with that, Our first question is, what makes an applicant stand out? Is emphasis placed more heavily on certain aspects of the application? Anyone can feel free and jump in.
I can start, given that I started earlier and I dropped many acronyms on everybody. And thanks, Adam, for demystifying the acronyms. For me, the things that I pay a lot of attention is kind of the way people show perseverance, because in my mind, perseverance is one of the most important characteristics of a good scientist. So if it was that you have continued and did some research, and if you've done, if you had to overcome some challenges in order to get to school, whatever way that I can identify that you've overcome challenges and persevered, that gives me a good thumbs up. Additional things that I really value is where people show me that they are interested in research. So students that try when they're undergrads to go to labs and participate. There are lots of programs where you can apply after you've graduated to spend a year or so in a postbac or other options. Any kind of way that shows me that you're really interested in doing research is something that I flag as good thumbs up. And then in general, I'm trying to pay attention to the career path, the interest. Why do they want UCSD? That's kind of goes along with their interest in research and paying attention to details. That's more or less kind of my point for now.
That's great insight. Thank you so much.
Well, that's going to be hard to top.
Perhaps if you thought of certain applications that maybe you still remember that you've, just came out as really phenomenal for your program, is there anything maybe over the years that you've participated in admissions that kind of have stuck with you that you remember from really exceptional applicants?
I'll weigh in. So kind of adding on to what Alon is saying, I think with all of these applications, the process, the first process is, at least for neuroscience, that a small group, like say, I think we had 4 people in our group, will have to read about 50 applications. And all of the say, I think in neuroscience, I don't know how many applicants we have, maybe there's 300 or something. So each 50 gets assigned to these small groups, and somehow your application has to rise to the top of those 40 or 50. And it's not simply a matter of like, oh, who gets the best grades or who has, right? It's kind of like the thing that you remember the most after you go through all of these things, whose story seems the most memorable. And so it's a combination of, who, like, I was saying perseverance. I think there's like something very, very important about people who really show that they are really interested and passionate about science. And how do they show that? A lot of times it's by bringing up these issues of how they stuck with things, challenges, which, part of graduate school is like so many challenges. Science doesn't work. Family stuff gets in the way, life stuff gets in the way. So challenges can be all kinds of things like that, and kind of showing like, yeah, you've risen above these challenges and you've done it because you're really interested in some area or some topic. So that's, I just wanted to reiterate that idea that Ellen said is like communicating your passion for the science, like why you want to be in graduate school, and then communicating kind of like your perseverance and your dedication. Those, in my opinion, tend to be the ones that I remembered. And the ones that were very dry and like, this is what I've done, and this is what I've done, and this is what I've done. It's a little harder to kind of feel moved by that and remember it after you've read 40 or 50 of these.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for that. Does anyone else, Dr. Engler or Romero, do you want to add anything? No worries. If not, we have lots of questions.
No, I think they covered that pretty well.
Yeah.
Frankly, a lot of what they said plays into chemistry as well, in exactly the same way.
Awesome. Well, perfect. Let's move on to the next question. So my next is a little tangential, frankly, but maybe a little bit more specific. So what are the top 3 things that someone can do during their undergrad or their postgrad to make themselves a competitive applicant? Top 3.
I think research is obviously a big one.
Yep.
Getting experience. I mean, it's hard to prove that you want to go into a graduate field without having done it. You know, these fields are so difficult and filled with years of problems, right? If you don't really know what you're getting into, it's hard to sell the admissions committee that you know what you're getting into, right? And I think that's half the battle. In addition to research, we this year put a very heavy emphasis on outreach. I don't think in today's day and age it's enough to just be ourselves, you know, really amazing people, but we have to look out for the community that we're in. We have to help each other rise up and get better as a community, because only then can the world actually succeed. And so we actually put a lot more emphasis on that this year. To say that it almost became equally as important in our eyes as grades did.
That's very insightful. Thank you so much. If you, and feel free to say you can't rank so, but if you were to rank between research experience, outreach, and grades, would you be able to put a rank to that? Or would you say those are kind of 3 on the same level?
So me personally, I put research and outreach on the same level. And I actually put grades a little bit under that. I don't think grades are a great metric of what you can achieve. I mean, of course, there's a baseline level that needs to be obtained, but there's always so many circumstances that go into grades that we get during our undergraduate years that it does not speak to who the person is and what they're capable of.
Great, thank you so much.
So,
does anyone else want to jump in?
Sure, if I could just volunteer a quick thought, and that is, I think a lot of departments and programs are now moving towards a holistic review and weighing things equally. Our department has been part of something called Seaside, which is an initiative in the graduate division to help increase, to be more inclusive and holistic in our graduate admissions process. So we, for example, we do not look at standardized test scores like GRE. That's not, we have eliminated that. And we have a rubric that we score all of our applicants, both PhD and masters, on academics. And this is not just, do they have a high GPA, but have they been successful in their coursework that matters the most to us? If you have a 4.0 GPA in classes that just are not going to be predictive of your success in our graduate program, it's not that helpful. Second one is experience, and I think we've all talked about, you know, having research experience for STEM backgrounds is important. We've heard about broader impact. I know that another panelist brought up, you know, issues related to that, and, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion are important. But the last thing that we have in our rubric is communication, and you know, appropriate communication skills. It's really important from an applicant perspective. Having good communication skills within your application, that statement of purpose, is super important. You may not think that a lot of people read it, but I read every single one from every applicant, at least to our PhD program, which means that I read about 500 a year. So it's a lot, but we do read them. So communication written is important in your application, and then in your actual interview, there are a lot of issues with oral communication, and how you get that across. Your interest in the program is super important. So I would emphasize communication, both written and oral, is very important in the applicant process.
Thank you so much. That's really insightful. And I just wanted to chime in a little bit, as having experience with admissions myself, and maybe as a review to some students who may not be quite as far along in that grad school application process. So for a lot of PhD programs in STEM, there's the application, which is electronic, reviewed, and then after, a lot of times a pool of applicants are selected for interviews. And so I think that's what Dr. Engler was talking about, is that you first have to make it through kind of the selection through the written application, but then after you're invited, and pre-COVID, a lot of times you were even flown out from wherever you were to come to UCSD and an interview with faculty. And that's when that communication aspects of being able to discuss your research in real time without having all this time on paper to talk about it becomes really enlightening. So I just wanted to give a little background on that application process, in case not all of our students were familiar. Great. I think that was really insightful, and I want to make time for all of our questions. So I'm going to go ahead and move.
Can I just add one?
Well, yeah, Dr. Gorin, feel free.
Just kind of further even talking about the research experience, it kind of reflected in the letters from the recommenders. And for some reason, one day perhaps I will try to fight that there's also need for 3 letters. The most important ones are the letters from a mentor that the student has been working with. And in this regard, this is kind of goes along with the perseverance. I would pay much more attention for a letter for someone that the student has been working with more than a couple of months. So ideally, the longer and the more knowledge the person has for the student, the more I feel it is appropriate and more informative to know what they think about the student.
Yeah, thank you so much. And actually, that segues right into my next question, which is, who should write my letters of recommendation? So students applying, typically 3 letters. Some programs give the option even for 4. Who do you advise write your letters to students?
Don't pick the most famous person in your department.
Fair enough.
Chances are they have no idea who you are, unless you've worked in their lab or taken a class from them. But even still, someone that can write a quality letter, someone that's known you for many years, is going to be way better than random professor that you took a class from. Unless you took like 2 classes or 3 classes or had some great interaction with them. But I'd go quality interaction over any perceived fame. What
would be your feedback, just jumping straight into the nitty-gritty of the letters, in terms of, you mentioned a mentor. If that mentor is a grad student, a postdoc, or a senior scientist, is that an appropriate person to ask for a letter, or is the professor or the only appropriate person? What do you guys all think?
I think the best case scenario will be that, and this is the way I'm trying to do it in my lab, is that I will engage if there is a direct mentor that works with a student, I would engage them in writing the letter. But by the end of the day, the letter many times would come from me. I think that's kind of the more common practice. It's also that it's easier to read letters from faculty just because we write so many of them that we kind of got a use of how to write them. And when I read letters from graduate students, sometimes you can feel that it's hard for them also to compare to other students. the other thing, note for everybody, is to give your letter writers as long as possible and make sure that they remember. So they probably will work on it on the last week, but tell them at least 2 or 3 months in advance, or at least a month.
Great, thank you so much. Does
Write a
anybody-
draft. Yeah,
Yep,
I'd
go
say
ahead.
write a draft to give it to someone. Doesn't matter if you're asking a graduate student or a faculty member. If you do ask a graduate student, I would suggest that you encourage them to write it together with a faculty member that is their advisor. So I don't do this all the time, but sometimes if a grad student really wants to help write something, that's great. It's good experience for them too. And so we can both sign it. Nothing stops you from doing that.
Great, thank you.
I'll just quickly add, you really want one super strong letter at the very least. And that's ideally your research mentor, the person whose lab you've been in, who really is able to say something like, wow, this student put in all this time and effort, or really was interested in what we were doing and made some contributions. It's likely that it's going to be hard to get 2 such letters unless you were in 2 labs for an extended period of time. That's unlikely. So really think who's going to be that person who's going to be your main advocate who will impress us, the reviewers, and then try to get the rest of it is like personal letters from people who know you.
Great, thank you so much. And I just wanted to follow up before we move on from the letters of recommendation. What's your advice in terms of people who are coming into grad school from industry? Are industry letters from industry, as long as they're PhD holders, equivalent to a faculty member? Would you recommend they go then pull from a faculty member from their undergrad if they're in industry? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. Me personally, when I was doing it, I viewed them pretty comparably. I mean, the whole point is to show, to speak to your leadership, your all the stuff we've been saying, leadership, ability to persevere. And I think as long as whoever's writing the letter has overseen people before who they have that point of comparison, then I think that can be a stellar letter, as long as that person knows the applicant well enough to speak to it. I didn't bother to delineate between academic versus industrial.
I would also speak to not just the relevance of what they're saying, but also the timing. For example, today I had a letter of reference, or like a reference check for someone who I was on their thesis committee for their PhD, and they graduated in 2016. I mean, I had to rack my brain to remember who this person was and then look up their thesis and see my notes and blah, blah, blah. So if you've been in industry from, or if you go to industry, since I presume most people are senior undergrads on the call today, if you choose to go to industry for 2, 3, 4 years, that's great. We look at those students as like super master students, or there's a tremendous amount of value to that. But if you go back to someone who sophomore year taught you math 20C, that's not going to be very helpful, because that person's not going to remember you very well. So they're not going to be able to say a whole lot about you. So I would prefer to get a letter from your immediate supervisor at your company who says Joe or Jane is amazing, than someone from 5-10 years ago who says, I think I remember who this student is.
And kind of to add to that, if someone that you ask for a letter is hesitant, then it's probably not a good letter writer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Do you have any advice in how to keep in touch maybe with some previous professors and supervisors who you might be in, you might want to ask them for letters in a year or 2, but you want to make sure that that doesn't happen, that you don't kind of fall off their radar?
Constant email and phone conversations. I had a summer student he was a rising sophomore. I run a research experience for undergraduate program. So it's a summer research thing for 8 weeks. So he was in my lab for 8 weeks, but every quarter since he's been in my lab, he's followed up with at least an email and sometimes a phone call. And he's just saying, hey, Dr. Engler, how's it going? You know, grades were great this quarter. You know, I'm doing really well. Thank you so much. You know, we talk about other summer programs that he would do because he was at a small predominantly undergraduate institution. He ended up going to Georgia Tech for grad school. I wrote him a letter for that, even though he had had an interaction with me 3 years prior. Because he kept in contact, I knew everything about Ken. And, you know, he was always just very open and honest and excited for science. And now, gosh, let me think, that was 7 years ago. I mean, I still wrote him a letter for Fulbright, and so, oh, he just got the NSF GRFP recently, you know, and I wrote him a letter for that. And I felt confident saying, hey, I know everything that Ken's working on. He shows me his, you know, research and papers. And so just keep in touch with folks. They'll remember you.
And from a mentor perspective, I love getting updates from my previous mentees. It's kind of one of the missions I have in science, to promote scientists and follow them.
That's great. That's great advice. I know as a grad advisor, that's actually a topic that we talk about a lot is, you know, what's the best, how to move forward, knowing that you're going to you want to ask someone from a letter 2 or 3 years out. So I think that's really helpful. Thank you so much. So I want to pivot a little bit and address a question that I think we don't think a whole lot about, but I'm assuming that a lot of you have had experience with this. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice for international applicants. So if during your review of applications, what are some things that international applicants can do to make their applications successful, and do you have any advice in general?
This may be a good question for people like Adam or more senior people. Like, what are the rules in terms of funding for international students? It depends on department and program and stuff, right?
Yeah, it's tricky because a lot of students will come in if you're interested in PhD programs. You know, our research dollars can go to fund those students. You know, you're at a competitive disadvantage because you're not eligible for a lot of fellowships. So the NIH has the F31 program. You're not eligible for that. NSF has the GRFP that I mentioned earlier. That stands, NSF is National Science Foundation, GRFP is Graduate Research Fellowship Program. You're not eligible for those. So you may not look as attractive to other versus domestic students, but I would not say that should discourage you, because if you're a really good fit for a program, you should go for it. The one thing that I have seen for international students that makes it trickier, especially if they're coming from abroad to the US just for graduate school. If you're an international student and you're here today, you're probably a UCSD student already, so it's kind of a different ballgame. I have 2 international students right now that are doing PhDs in my lab. They were undergraduates elsewhere and then came to UCSD for graduate school. So it was a little bit of a different story. They kind of knew the system already. But I would just say be really familiar with the universities that you're applying to. What are some of their mechanisms for funding? And it's not a question that you should be embarrassed about. By asking, once you get to say an oral interview, just say like, hey, how do you usually fund graduate students, especially international students? Because every university will have their own policies and whatnot. So
yeah, thank you so much. I think that was really helpful. Thank you.
One addition to that, and it kind of depends on the program, is some programs allow something called direct admit. So instead of many programs for PhD require that the first year you're doing rotation and then you choose what lab you're joining. An alternative to that is that as soon as you join the PhD program, if you have identified a mentor, a faculty mentor that is willing to fund you and support you, you can join the lab and skip the first year of rotation, which usually is what requires institutional funding. So some programs allow that, and in a way there is an advantage to that, especially if that's a lab that you have been before and you're familiar with. So this is, again, something to consider as an alternative option.
It's a good point. I would also, just to piggyback on what I was saying earlier, because I didn't think about it, although you're at a disadvantage because there are fellowships in the United States that you're not eligible for, you're actually at an advantage if you are well-versed in your home country and the funding mechanisms there. There are ways that you can fund your research here. Korean students have the Kwanjeong Educational Foundation. In Thailand, the Thai NSF has a fellowship program to bring students to the US. In Singapore, you have A-STAR. There are just a lot of them out there. So I would look at your home country as well, not necessarily if you're not interested in doing your training there, there still may be funding mechanisms to bring you to the United States or to fund your work that's ongoing in the US. Mexico has the Connect program. Brazil has CAPE. There are a whole slew of acronyms that go along with all these programs.
That's great. Thank you so much. I myself did not think about that.
And UCSD has some fellowships that are hyper specific. So we have a fellowship program that is specific for students of Taiwanese origin, right? So there are a whole slew of random fellowships out there. I would just do your homework.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. All of that was very helpful. So with that, we've come to the end of my questions, actually. And so I'd love to take this opportunity to open it up to the floor. We've gotten tons of questions through the chat, and we'll definitely get to as many of those as possible. But I wanted to give the opportunity for anyone who wanted to unmute themselves to just go ahead and ask a question at this time if they wanted to.
I have a question. So if there are labs that I'm interested in applying to the following cycle, is it favorable for them to like reach out to you or ask you to, if it's okay to reach out to your grad students to like discuss research or fit with your lab?
So just to get just a little clarification, you're talking about applying to a PhD program the next cycle, and you're wondering if it's favorable to contact the faculty ahead of time before your application?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I'll let the panelists speak to that.
You definitely can. I've had students reach out to me, kind of like you're suggesting. It becomes a little challenging anyway, because, you know, for the most part, we go through the application. And so even if there is a fit and all this stuff, we can't say, you know, whether you would actually be admitted to the program because we don't have the full slate of applications. So it's kind of asking a question and we're trying to answer it without most of the information we would actually need. So we would be able to totally, you know, talk with you and say, yeah, like your research interest, we totally work in that field and we do a lot of stuff that you would probably be interested. And then you would often get the ending of, you should definitely apply to our PhD program. And that's usually how that would go. So if you are trying to really figure out if you would enjoy that lab, definitely do it. You'll really get an answer as to what that lab is actively working in, but you wouldn't necessarily get a response of like, yeah, you would, you know, we would definitely take you in, something like that. That just wouldn't happen on that spot.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth between the questions in the chat to make sure we get through some of those, and then opening it up to the floor. So one question that we got a couple times actually is, do people who've done their undergraduate at UCSD have an advantage over other equally matched people who did their undergraduates elsewhere when it comes to getting into UCSD graduate programs?
I think it's program specific. Different faculty and different departments are going to feel differently about that question. I would say for bioengineering and to some extent BMS, it's, you know, maybe there's a small advantage, but it's probably not statistically significant.
Kind of feel the same with neuroscience, maybe, but only in the kind of network level interaction, like somebody who gives you a really strong recommendation letter who's in our program, that might carry a little bit more weight than a random professor that nobody knows. So I think it can help in those ways, but not in probably a huge or very strong way.
Fair enough.
And I think sometimes the goal is to also bring in students from elsewhere. So it's hard to really answer the question, but because as was said, like, it's easier to know the people that recommend and so on. But if someone comes from a good place with good letters, that sometimes also provide like, okay, let's bring some new knowledge to UCSD.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I know that was a tough question, but thanks for your insight. So I have Scott who has his hand raised. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question.
I was wondering, is it like normal and kind of acceptable to kind of like cold email a professor that like you aren't familiar with, you don't know, but you've seen his labs and everything and you're very interested in his work? Because like, I'm a transfer student, so I've yet to have a lot of contact with research professors in my classes. So I'm having to kind of, the only way to getting lab experience before my senior year is to just like cold email people. Is that like obnoxious, or is that kind of standard?
If I could interject for a second, I think what might be a more successful strategy would be for faculty that you're, and again, this would need to sort of be in your major, but if you're taking, you know, I don't know, a biochem class and you're in chem biochem, you're taking it from Professor X, but you really are interested in the work for Professor Y, you could still go to Professor X after class and just say, this was a super cool lecture. I am really enjoying the class. You know, I've been thinking about what I want to do in the future. I think I want to at least get some lab experience. And I've been thinking about one of your colleagues, Professor Y. I'd love to hear, you know, what are your thoughts on what Professor Y does? What's the best way to get in contact with him or her? You know, you essentially then have a different angle into emailing that person. Then say, you could email Professor Y and then say, you know what, I was just talking to Professor X, and he or she says, you are super cool. You know, you can build up their ego that way. And they're more likely to respond.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I started kind of try to go that route. The only professor that I've tried that with so far is leaving soon, so it wasn't like super helpful yet, but that is a very good suggestion. I'll keep trying that with others. Thank you.
And then that's a good suggestion. One thing I'll say is, so the undergraduates that I have in my lab actually right now, both just emailed me out of the blue. Like, I had no prior experience with them. They didn't take any classes with me. But it again comes down to setting yourself apart. Like we get a lot of undergrad applications every day, week, month. And it's really, how can you set yourself apart? So they, as I think was noted in the chat, I think they read several of the things that I had done in the past, and they built my ego up a little bit. It's always a little nice, but really aligned themselves with my vision for research and kind of what I wanted to do. And they put it in my mind how they were going to fit in the lab and what they were going to bring. So, if you go the route of just sending an email, definitely personalize it. That's going to give you the best chance to get a response.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very helpful. Thank you.
I'll just add, usually if somebody contacts me, I'm looking for like somebody who can spend at least a year, ideally even 2 years, because 6 months means you're going to learn stuff, but you're not going to really help the lab too much. So just kind of keep that in mind too, is like, you want to be able to say, yeah, I'm looking forward to spending a year or more to really learn, contribute. So kind of put that into any approach or letter.
My
Yeah,
letter
like,
sorry.
Go on. No.
My letters so far have been based around wanting to enter the CogSci honors program. So that puts me with that faculty member for a year. Is that something that you look at as like help that would help the lab, or is that something looked at as I'm trying to help like myself?
Synergistic. Goes both ways.
Yeah. It sounds like if there's a program set up and it's a 1-year program, it's kind of perfect, and you need a mentor to apply for.
All right.
So that's like a good way to, I think, approach mentors.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. So I wanna get the chance for everybody to speak, and I see that Alvin has his hand raised. So if you would like to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. I know Dr. Ramanathan, you just talked about like long-term research, but I do have like a very good like relationship with like a grad student at Stanford, and I sometimes go back to like the Bay Area to do research there. How do you guys view like short-term summer research only?
I guess I'll answer since you called me out first. I think at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong way to get research experience. It really just depends on what you're able to do, how you're able to help contribute, and what you're able to learn. And so think about it in 2 ways. Like, in a very like concrete way. Will you be able to ask somebody that you worked with for a letter, and will they be able to say anything about what you've done, right? And that's a good research experience. Even if it's 3 months, if you're like, say, a computational expert and you develop some software that their lab uses, that can take a week for somebody who's probably really good, or a few months, and that's a great experience, and that's something very concrete. If you go in for a summer and you show up every day, but like at the end of 3 months, the person's like, I don't really know what that student did, it's not going to be worth your time or their time. So it's not even about how much time you spend. It's really like what you're able to do, accomplish, learn, and can the person you worked with say something concrete about it? That's what I would say.
Yeah, I would say just to follow up on what Dr. Ramanathan just said, if you can explain it in a cogent way and be able to articulate what your contribution was to that project and make it sound like it wouldn't have been possible if you weren't a part of it, then that's a quality interaction. And again, just as what he was saying, it doesn't matter if it was a week, a month, or a year. If you are integral in that, that's important. And I say this coming from someone who runs a summer research program that's 8 weeks long. So oftentimes those short interactions can still be really meaningful, especially then if you follow it up over time and there are things you can do at your home institution, throughout the year, that's great. Oftentimes we've had projects, especially with COVID, where there was some wet lab component and then it transitioned to some additional computational stuff that could be done online, or just analyzing imaging data, from that grad student that you were helping with. All that's great, and just continue the relationship.
Great, thank you so much. And I think I want to kind of segue into a question that we've gotten in the chat, and a conversation that is worth having because of how the world has been affected in the last 2 years. I think it's been, and an echo I've heard from students, has been really challenging for applicants who are looking at this fall cycle or the next fall, is these students have spent a very large majority of their undergraduate during the pandemic, and it's made it very difficult to get their foot in the door with research experience. And so sometimes we get seniors who graduate who really want to be going into research but didn't get the chance during their undergraduate. So what can they do after graduation to get their foot in the door before this next application cycle?
I can start. So yeah, I mean, first, in most of the applications that I've looked at in the last 2 years, there was a rubric to describe how COVID has impacted you, and we pay attention to it. Regarding specifically your question, it's important to note that it's not only the goal of doing research for having your application be, or having your application stand out. It's also important for you to know, A, do you like research? I mean, sometimes people do not like banging their head on the wall all the day. Some people do not like it. So make sure that it's for you. B, do you like this kind of research? And then it is important to try and get a way into doing research. And I feel like we all do whatever we can to get people on whatever stage. And I have a student that when COVID started, it took forever till she joined, and eventually it worked out somehow. So the goal is to kind of find a way in between to make it work, and even be a bit more patient. Perhaps try to find a way that you can postpone your application till you've had the experience. Again, not just for your application, just to make sure that it's something that you like.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So we have a question from a student, Kanishka, if you'd like to unmute yourself. And I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Feel free to correct me as soon as you unmute.
Oh no, you actually pronounced it correctly.
Oh, great.
So for context, I'm an electrical engineering major and I have been in the lab for about a year. So I'm just wondering, do you guys care about personal projects, or should I be investing time in personal projects? Should I be investing time in just more lab work?
Can you define what a personal project is?
Maybe it's recently I've been working on a system Verilog implementation of a FFT, something like that, or a C++ project.
I think if there's some tangible link to anything you can document or verify, or have someone externally describe what you've been doing, then that's great. If it's something that is difficult to verify, if you've just been coding something on the side, I've oftentimes seen with more of our bioinformatics students that they'll actually put together a personal portfolio as a way, and that's something you can append to your application to show, I have also done X, Y, or Z, and the code's on GitHub, or whatever you might do to showcase that. But usually it's in some sort of personal portfolio that you have put together. So I think that's kind of the best way to highlight some of those non-standard activities.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So we actually got a question in the chat that I kind of want to jump to because we're almost out of time, and I think this will interest a lot of students. Is there a preference for applicants who go straight into a master's and/or PhD program versus those who wait a few years and work in between undergraduate and graduate school?
I'm gonna go with no. I mean, there are pluses and minuses. The plus is if you've done master's degrees somewhere else, post-bac program, that's super common in the MD PhD program. Because you want to build up your research chops, if you will, and be in different settings. So that can be helpful for some programs. Others, they may not value that nearly as much. I think that it's too variable to have sort of a universal statement.
Yeah,
I think it all comes down to whether really how can you make the best case for yourself in the application. If you need that extra year to build up those research chops or to get that extra letter that's going to put you over the top, then you should definitely do it. If you think you got it and you're ready to go straight into a PhD program or what have you, then you should do that too, right? It all comes down to your personal feeling about it too.
great. And then actually, this is my own question, but this is something I've heard from students. Is there a difference in the way you weigh somebody who's done a 2-year or 1 or 2 years master's degree versus someone who's done 1 or 2 years as a research technician, as far as entry into a PhD program?
At least for me, it all goes back to the same rubric. I don't delineate between those two, so it still goes down to the letters, to the preparation, what research have you done, what outreach have you done. Like it all still comes back to that same rubric for chemistry.
Same here.
You may be at an advantage in that you have finished all of your graduate coursework, and maybe some of that will be recognized by a new university. So that may be an advantage in terms of moving through the program. But I don't know. Excuse me. I don't know from an admissions perspective, does that really confer an advantage or not?
Great, thank you. And then I just want to take the last few minutes because we've gotten quite a few questions from students on funding. So if we could just quickly get a little bit of insight on what the funding options are for graduate programs in your field, and how can students find funding on their own if it doesn't come from graduate programs?
UCSD has a 5-year funding guarantee. Many other universities are moving towards that. So people should just be aware of that. But extramural fellowships always look more attractive, always make a student look more attractive. By extramural, we mean all the fellowships that we've been talking about, NIH, NSF, American Heart Association, American Cancer Society, blah, blah, blah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I hope everybody knows that as a graduate student, you're getting some salary and not paying for tuition. The PI is actually paying for the tuition. And the other thing regarding fellowships, the way I envision it is that it also really helps the student build their CV and get experience in getting into the process of applying and figuring out how it works.
Great, thank you so much. So with that, we just have one more slide to wrap up with. So I know that we didn't get to all of your guys' questions, and we actually have some resources for you guys. Our Career Center website has a lot of really good information for you to just peruse. You, through Handshake, can schedule a one-on-one with a pre-grad advisor to get really into the nitty-gritty of those questions, or even if you are ready to start walking through an application. And then we do have a very similar event to this one next Tuesday that's focused more on business, social sciences, and humanities. If you're maybe in psych or econ and you're kind of straddling these fields, maybe that would be of interest to you too. So with that, I really want to thank our panelists today. Thank you so much for your really valuable insight. I myself learned a lot, and it sounds like our students here learned a lot as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Have a good evening, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for everyone who put this together and attended. Thank you. I appreciate the help.
Yeah, thanks so much.
I just had a quick question. Is that available to alumni too? The Pregrad Advisor?
Yes, so you can meet with us for up to 1 year after your graduation. So unfortunately, if it's been past that, the one-on-one advising is typically not open.
Okay, I'm a spring 22 grad, so. I'll be
Perfect. Then
completing
yeah,
after
go
school.
ahead and feel free to schedule a meeting with us.
All right, thank you.
Yep.